Are you awake? You have to be after that. I mean, when you're getting as old as I am, and I hate to admit this, I probably understood like 3 words. Okay, okay, if all you laughed, like they're like pandemic. That's the only thing I heard him say. Um, no, I should have listened a little bit better, but that was pretty fast. So, hey, we just want to welcome you all. We want to welcome our online audience as well. We're glad that you can be with us. We're happy to announce that we have some satellites that are out there, one in Glenside and one that's getting going in Fox Chase. Come on now. You got to keep up with us. We're just planting all over the place, and some great things are happening. So just appreciate you guys being with us, and hopefully you've been blessed by the series that we've been on for this month of February, the Cross-Eyed Culture series that we've been on. And thus far, we've talked about just what it looks like for our identity, the worthiness of God, and all those things, the worthiness that He gives on us and puts on us. And then the second week, we got to talk about forgiveness. That was last week. And hopefully that helped some people to get revelation of what forgiveness is and how much it affects when you live with unforgiveness. I really encourage you. Those are one of those words that we give them. It's like, this actually needs to be done like once a month. Because again, we live in this canceled, triggered culture that there's just so much that we've been offended by. And even as we were growing up and younger, we just didn't realize, but we were hurt, bothered, maybe got bittered, experienced some trauma, and it results in some things. And so we need healing from that. And there's a way that God provides a way for us to be forgiven, but also gives us revelation of what it means to forgive. Anyway, that was a little bit of last week, and we're just going to keep it going with this cross-eyed culture. I don't know if this will be the last one. We'll keep going into March and keep talking about more things as it pertains to the cross, what the cross reveals to us, what we see by what Christ did on the cross. It's so multifaceted. There's so much that He made available and that He did through that. And I think a lot of what's happening in just, I don't know, how do I say this? In just the basic of basic Christians is they're losing sight of the cross. It's almost like, how can you say you love Jesus, but not even act like Him? Not even remember what He's like? How do you know His name, but not reflect His nature? So it's just one of those things like, man, we just gotta go back to the cross, go back to the fundamentals, go back to the basics, and just look at it fresh and anew. And so I've been happy to do it. It's been a blessing for me to also look at the cross. And the idea of the cross-eyed culture is that we not are like people that are looking like both our eyes are like getting crossed. But that's how the culture should look at us, because how we look at the world through the cross, the culture should be like, huh? I don't want to do that. You ever get that way? He's like, if they cross your back and someone pats you on the back, it's gonna stay like that forever? No? That was like a little thing your parents told you to do. Is like, don't cross your eyes because somebody hits you in the back. You're gonna stay like that forever. Anyway, the world will look at us through cross eyes because of how we look at the world and how we interact with the things around us based on how the cross of Christ impacted us. And so I want to say something before I get into this time. For those of you who've been following and wondering about what's been happening with the building campaign, thank you again for those of you who give specifically to that. We give our tithe and offering, but you specifically have to designate if you want to get to our building campaign for us to move, just the Heart for the House. I believe it's marked as that on the PushPay app, or you give by envelope. Just mark it off for that. Then is designated to that fund that it's going to take for us to move, to occupy that space, and all those other things. But what I want to report to you about this week, because we've been making slow progress, but progress, is I've noticed that as a result of being on this building campaign and searching for a building, a lot of influential people, I'm coming into contact with a lot of them. I'm coming in contact with a lot of influential people that now they've been in the city for a while, and and due to this move, as I'm reaching out, there's connections that are being made, and for me, something might not happen from it, but I'm not looking for just a transaction, because the relationship, the kingdom just doesn't work off of transactional things, but it's impartational, it's relational. So if anything, it might not be where they can help me, but I'm always coming into that situation like I got something to give to them, and there might be a reason that we're meeting, and this is just an excuse to meet. Are you following me? So there's a bunch of influential people in its odd moments, and I don't want to put names out there. So if you see me in an odd place, in a place like, well, first of all, what are you doing there? But no, don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna be like a crazy like strip club type thing. But I'm gonna, like, I was just somewhere last night with my brother Jonathan, and we were with an individual that I was just so glad to meet him. A lot of controversy has been around his life, and he's been in the city, and he, you know, but it was just so good to interact with him, and he wanted to see the place, and he was like, wow, I'm impressed, and just impressed with what we've done and all that stuff. So this is definitely, In the Light is unique in terms of what it's done, and he only saw the facility. He didn't see the people. He didn't see the kind of stuff that happens in the presence, and anyway, so anyway, I'm praying for him, and I'm just glad that we're interacting. So there's a lot that God is doing beyond just moving us to a new facility, is what I'm saying. There's interaction, there's some kingdom, or there's some things that are happening, because our vision is this. Our vision, if you remember, is to disciple nations and to transform culture. And you can't transform culture without being in certain cultural mountains and to be around cultural influencers. And so those are the places that we influence, and we're not worried about us getting contaminated. They gotta worry about them getting contaminated with what we got, in a good way, right? In the Old Testament, they said, get away from the leper. In the New Testament, they moved towards the leper, because what I have in me is more powerful than what you have in you. Amen? So, anyway, a little sermon before the sermon, but I just wanted to let you guys know that this last weekend has been a trip, because there's like 3 different messages, and I'm like, I just was tempted to preach one of those other ones, but I feel like God wants me to say this to you today. But I was talking to pastors. I was in Allentown yesterday and got back from there, and in time for the evening and do some stuff. But now I'm here before you today, and this subject, what I'm going to talk to you about today, is just how the good news gets gooder. That's just vernacular you're going to have to get used to. We don't always speak in proper English. So good gets gooder, or the good news gets better. It just gets better. And so I want to talk to you about some of this good news. And this might be, out of each of the things I've talked about up to this point with the Cross-Eyed Culture series, this might be the hardest one for me. It might not be for you, but it's one of the hardest ones to grasp it, of how God is towards us. So I'll talk to you about it, but I'm going to be real vulnerable and transparent and tell you probably the hardest one to grasp, because of how God is towards us. And in this moment when Jesus was on the cross, his last 3 words were, "It is finished." It wasn't announcing like, I'm about to die, like I'm dead now, and I'm just letting you guys all know that I'm dead. It wasn't that him communicating that. The words, "It is finished," were significant to the purpose of him dying on the cross. It was as if when Jesus was saying that, it was like closing a chapter and opening up a new chapter. So he's like, the old chapter is done. The old covenant is done. We're turning the page. Everything I've done up to this point and this moment right now, he was cognizant enough to announce, it is finished. We're going from an old covenant to a new covenant. We're going into a whole new dispensation. And he announces that to the world in his last breath. Because, he was just going to be, for 3 days, he was going to be in the grave and he was coming back. So it's not like his time on earth was even finished. It wasn't like that was maybe his last breath for that moment, but his final breath will never be taken because it continues on. So he was saying it is finished because he was satisfying the sin dilemma. And we talked about that in the first week, and we visited that again last week. But he was satisfying the sin debt that we all had. And there was a dilemma. This dilemma had it so that we were people that had to work at getting God to be good with us. There was this whole thing that was set up, this whole performance that had to be done with the sacrificing of lambs or of bulls, and their priests and their garb, and everybody had to be dressed up right, and everybody had to have the right equipment in place, and you had to bring the right sacrifice to the place. So it was this whole performance. It was a lot of work. When you think about it, if you get into the specifics of what they had to do, it's like, man, that's a lot of work. But again, it's a holy God, and it had to be done perfectly, and they were satisfying a debt. It was worse than going to the DMV. It was really challenging to get in good with God, and they had to perform this again and again and again. These characters and this demonstration and this performance, and it got to the place where when Jesus said, it is finished, it meant mankind doesn't have to work so hard anymore. Like, it is different. Man doesn't have to work for it anymore. Man doesn't have to work for getting in the good graces with God. It is finished. Like, at that point, you would think a lot of people, like, it would be a celebration, but a lot of people are looking at that moment. We can only look at it in retrospect and look at it now and understand the fullness of what he was saying. But it was an awesome moment where it's like, I did the work. The job is over. You don't have to work anymore. Done. Like, the work is done. You don't have to perform anymore. You don't have to do all that stuff. Not only did it satisfy that sin dilemma when it came from man having to work for it, it satisfied that God doesn't have to work out how not to destroy us. Because it was always like, man, like, here they go. They're doing this stuff. We're going to have to work this out. Let's send a prophet. We got to work this. Send a judge. We got to work this out, man. He had to work it out to work out things with us. Like, he had to keep working it out so that he didn't totally destroy us. All right, we're going to get Noah because he's the best one out of all these cats that are out here. Let's build a boat. That took a lot of work. And let's just put a certain amount of people in here, and this is what we're going to do next. And now we have to recreate mankind through his lineage, and his son did what it was a bunch of stuff. So man would always kind of mess it up, and God had to work it out how not to destroy us. Like, how many sheep we got to kill? How many bulls did we have to kill? How many doves do we have to kill? Like, it was always work. It was work for us. It was work for him. And then on the cross, we didn't maybe get it fully then, but hopefully we can look at it now. He was saying, it is finished. All that work that man had to do, job's over. You're good. You're good with God if you're good with me, right? And all that work that my Father had to do, it's finished. It's done. He satisfied the sin debt. He paid the price on that cross. So the cross closed the bloody chapter, and I'm saying bloody not in a British way. I'm saying bloody as it was bloody. The bloody work, the bloody performance, the bloody things that we had to do, he closed the chapter on that, and he opened the doors of heaven for us to come in through. It is finished. You have access. You don't have to work at it. It is finished because I did the work. Do you see the cross? Do you see the scars? Do you receive the blood? I did the work. So my Father doesn't have to work on things anymore when it comes to us. And you don't have to work at things to get to my Father. Oh, come on. That is the good news. That he did the heavy lifting. That is the good news. And if you were to surmise what was happening in that moment, let me give you this word, because this is what we're going to talk about during our time together. And it's part of what I'm saying. It's one of the hardest things to grasp about, how God is towards us now. And it's this word grace. It's the word grace. Grace means unmerited favor. Unmerited favor. Like you couldn't earn it. You couldn't work enough to get it. Like even your best work, it's not good enough for what will satisfy God and allow God to give you like favor and blessing and kindness and his compassion. It's this word grace. Grace is scandalous. Grace is difficult for us, for me at least, to really capture. So I'm going to preach through this. I'm going to preach myself happy. I'm going to answer my own altar call after this. I'm like, I want to, because I've studied grace. I've looked at grace and many books I've read about grace. Those are the books that actually bring me the most tears when I read those books. I mean, his forgiveness is amazing, but there's something about his grace and how he is towards us and how he sees us. He sees me. He sees you as his favorite. Isn't that crazy? Like you're his favorite now. That's what it means to have favor. It's like you're my favorite. And what do you do with your favorite people in the world? You give and bless them and have favor upon them. That's grace. That is grace. In Colossians 1:19 going to 23, it says this: for God in all his fullness was pleased to live in Christ. And through him, God reconciled everything to himself. Reconciled. That is an accountant type of word. He reconciled. He made the books right. There was a debt. He made it right because of what Christ has done, right? Everything to himself. He made peace with everything in heaven and on earth. He's just like, oh, after what Christ did, I'm good. God is like, I'm good with people because I took it out on Jesus. I'm good. He's satisfied. And I'm good. The punishment was on him. The debt was on him. His blood, it says, by means of Christ's blood on the cross, now he can look at you and just be like, you don't owe me nothing if you're in Christ. You don't owe me nothing. I don't got beef with you. You don't got to work for anything anymore. It's like I'm just looking at you like you are my favorite. You are awesome. It's hard. I know it's hard. We'll keep going. I'm going to do my best to help you and help me too. This includes you who were once far away from God. You were his enemy. Anybody realize that they were enemies of God? I was an enemy of God. I was like public enemy number one, right? Like we were enemies of God, separate from him by your evil thoughts and actions. Yet now he has reconciled you to himself through the death of Christ in his physical body. As a result, he has brought you into his own presence. It's like the place we couldn't be in because we were so unholy and unqualified. And I was like, get over here. Get over here. You're my favorite. Like in that place is like no, get away, right? So as a result, he has brought you into his presence, and you are holy and blameless as you stand before him without a single fault. That's what Christ did. It's like, it is amazing what the cross did and what it satisfied and who we are now. You know, it's such a trick of the enemy to bring shame into us for our past. When Christ says, I took on your shame. You don't even have to be ashamed anymore for all the stuff I took on your shame so that you can be blameless. And that's why you could tell the devil when he's like, no, you should be ashamed of that. No, he doesn't like you. No, God's going to reject you. He sees what you did. He remembers that. He's like, nuh-uh. He forgot that. The blood was like a magic eraser. It washed that away. And then to know that, to experience that, what freedom, right? But you must continue to believe this truth and stand firmly in it. Don't drift away from the assurance you received when you heard the good news. The good news has been preached all over the world, and I, Paul, have been appointed as God's servant to proclaim it. And let me just read you this in 2 Corinthians 8. Ooh, I got the wrong one. Yeah. I got like this. You guys got it up there? 8, 9? I'm going to have to do a quick Bible test. Okay. All right. 2 Corinthians 8, 9, it says, you know the generous grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that by his poverty he can make you rich. That's grace. That's grace. Like, you didn't even deserve it. You're so poor. You're so poor. You were so ratchet. You were so, is that the second week in a row that I said ratchet? Yeah, we're talking about sin, so ratchet always got to get slipped in there once in a while. You were such an outcast. We were just enemies. And like I said, what the cross has done and what Jesus has done, he has given you what you don't deserve, and he took what you deserved. And so this is grace. This is grace. What did I do? Like, what did I do? Am I just cute? Right? Am I just like funny? Is it something about my personality that made you do this for me, God? For real? Like, God is not like, a superficial person where all he's looking for is these like qualities about you. No, he's looking for holiness. He's looking for sinlessness. That's not going to attract him that you're funny, and all those things are great. He kind of made you in that way, but those are not things that are like, that's why I did that. That's why you're my favorite, because you're so funny. That's why I'm my favorite, because you're so intellectual. You're such an introvert. I like you. Everybody else is so loud in the family. It's not any of those qualities that cause him to say, you're my favorite because of that. It's really your association with his son, your connectedness with his son that has resulted, like it's a spillover, that he gives you this unmerited favor, this like, I just want to bless you. I just want to be kind to you. God is so satisfied by his son's extreme obedience. What did that extreme obedience look like? He put his life on the line. He died on a cross. He trusted the Father. We as humanity have hard time trusting the Father. We go through like a basic trial. We're like, God, I don't trust you anymore because, whatever, my car don't work, because my kid looked at me. I don't trust you anymore. I'm supposed to go to church. Are my kids supposed to be obedient now and everybody in my family love me? I don't trust you anymore. Where God is like, here's Jesus. His friends are betraying him. Everybody is bowing out on him, and everybody leaves him. And his Father himself is about to punish him because there's the sin aspect of what he's taking on. And Jesus took on all that punishment, and he was just obedient. He had the power to do something about it, but he trusted God that he withheld the power to do something about it and trusted God, what God was going to do with it. Extreme obedience. That extreme obedience of what Christ has done has now put God in a good mood. God is like in a good mood. He's like, my son is so awesome. You have parents that when your kids like behave, it just puts you in a good mood. Like, I just want to bless people. I just want to love. My kids love me. They're not like, anyway, I don't want to have this a therapy session for any parenting. But because I want to give grace. But just his son is such a good mood. God is in such a good mood because of his son that everyone who's associated with his son is his favorite. That's what happened. That's grace. It's like my son is so awesome. It's so crazy. He paid the debt. I'm not. There's no having to work anymore to make things right with man, and mankind doesn't have to work anymore to get. And I'm just want to be gracious. Like, you're all my favorite. It's like, I know it happens in the movies, but it's like that moment in the movie where the guy hears the good news in the bar. And he hears this good news, and I hope I don't cause nobody to backslide, but he hears this good news in the bar, and then he's looking around, and everybody is like, all drinks are on me, right? They do all that stuff. All right, let's change it up because I don't want to like hit anybody. And he's in a restaurant, and it's a good restaurant. It's like, shout out to Tierra Colombiana. Like, and everybody who's in Tierra Colombiana that day, like, just because of the news that he received, just because of that, like, the moment that he had with someone special, he is so blessed by that. He's like, you know what? All your meals are on me. In other words, you're all my favorite just because you're in association and you're in this moment. Are you following me? What did you do to earn that? There's nothing you did to earn that. There was nothing that you can say, it's merited unto me that I received a favor. I was just in the room. I was just a part of that moment. I was connected to his son. And when you're connected to the son, God's like, you're all my favorite. You're just, come over here. Like, when it describes heaven, it talks about in terms of like welcoming them into a feast. So I don't know how we imagine heaven to be. I don't know how we imagine what it is to be with God, to be in the kingdom. But you don't find many boring moments. I know there's boring churches out there. And you got to be careful because sometimes you guys you make church boring. Yeah, you do. I'm like, what? We have eternity with God, and there's so many things to celebrate, and his grace has been towards us. He's forgiven. This should be the most unboring place in the planet. Amen? Give grace to me if that offended you. I don't know. Just sheesh. I'm serious. Like, it should be just a time of celebration and of warmth. And so here's the good news. The good news is that God has given us grace, unmerited favor. Have you ever been someone's favorite? Like, maybe that's why it was hard for me, because I don't think I've ever been anybody. I mean, my wife, she tells me that all the time. That's awesome, and that's probably why she's like, you're my favorite. Like, good. I don't believe that all the time, but good. Especially when the grandkids come over. That's when I don't believe that at all. So, like being someone's favorite, like, what that is like, it's when and I've there's favorites and the people that you prefer and the people that so favorites are like when you have a favorite, they're on your mind. You think about them. You go places and you're like, man, that person will really like this. Let me just buy for them. Like you're thinking about them first when it comes to like a resource or like a person you really like. I got to introduce you to this person. You're thinking about their needs. Their needs are on your mind, and it's like, this is my favorite. I want to make sure that they don't have needs. I mean, I'm gonna find a way to meet that need because they're your favorite. And I don't know. I mean, sometimes I don't know what they've done to become favorites. Some, for grandkids, it's like they just were born. Just born. You're like, you're my favorite. You have done nothing but cry and poop, but you're my favorite. Right? Like, they're your favorite. You think about them. You consider them. They're the first one you want to bless. They're the first one you want to bless. Like, I know everybody, but I'm going to make sure my favorite is taken care of. You make sure that they have what they need. You connect them to your best people in resources. That's what it means to have favor. When you have God's favor, you are his favorite. And so he is thinking about you in those terms. He's like, man, that's what my favorite needs. That's what I need to connect them to this resource. I need to make sure they they have this, and you might think, oh, I have to do a bunch of stuff, and it's like, no, you're just my favorite, because everybody associated with my son gets this grace, gets this favor, and it's just yours to receive it. If you can just receive it, it's yours. And like, no, I got to do something. No, just receive it, because it's nothing you can do to receive it. In fact, if you think you need to earn it, then it messes up what my son did. You're trying to compare your works to what my son did, and it's never going to be better than what my son did. Just make sure you're in the family. Make sure you understand what he's done, and you're just my favorite. That is grace. That is grace. Maybe it's because I was like, I'm 1 out of 7 siblings. Big family. Yeah, they adopted more, so I was out of the house by the time they adopted. So I always say 1 out of 7 because that was really the time I was in my house. So I was 1 out of 7. But not only that, I'm smashed in the middle. I'm like right in the middle. Middle child syndrome, right? But technically my sister is the middle child, but she was the first girl. So she's not the middle child. No, I'm right in there. It's like you got the older brothers, you got the younger brothers, 2 on each side. Then you got that sister that's supposed to be in the middle, but she ended up being like, she might as well have been the firstborn, or the baby in the family. And then you have, my younger sister. So anyway, I'm not saying anything, but I don't think I was a favorite. I don't think I'm not the favorite. And I didn't help. Not only was I middle child, I didn't help. I was work. I was a piece of work. They had to work to love me, and to remember God sent him to us. God, yeah. I wasn't grace. I was like the thorn in the flesh. Like that's what my parents needed, grace, because I was the thorn in the flesh. And amen. You don't even know. You just hear the stories. So I wasn't that. I was that person, and so maybe that's why, because like I wasn't really anybody's like favorite in that sense. So this is like, it's a cool, awesome reality of how God sees us. But for some of us, maybe me just saying that, it's for some of us to like, it's hard for me to fathom like being his favorite. It's so hard because of like, I'm never nobody's favorite. I just gave people a hard time, and nobody, like not even grandma, not even like this or that. Like it was like a lot of kids to choose from, and I just wasn't one of them that they chose. And so that could be a hard thing, but this revelation of who God is towards us because of his son, I feel like you can't afford not to contend or to pray that you would just say, God, I need to receive what I thought needed to be worked for. And in fact, that was one of the things that I had, I prayed to God about, like just the fact that, God, I feel like I have to perform a certain way for you to feel a certain way about me. Like if I behave myself, if I'm obedient in this, and I'm respectable to a bunch of people, if I don't slip and say something I shouldn't say, or slip and think something I shouldn't think, and then like you're gracious towards me, and then you'll give me things, and then we'll be in good standing. And he's like, no, it's not how grace works. It's not what grace looks like. Grace is unmerited. Like you just got to receive it. Just got to know I'm just so satisfied by what my son did. I'm so sad I don't have to work another day in my life. Like I'm in sort of like retirement mode. I'm like, I can be a blesser. I just want to bless. I want to bless my children. I want to be excessive with them, especially because there's no dividing wall. There's no friction between us because of what Jesus has done. And this is that grace, his grace that he gives us. I found out that I had to I was living in it for a while before I knew I was living in it. Like I found out that I was living in grace, and like later on it struck me, hey, that was grace. And And I'm telling you, if you're in Christ and you have a hard time receiving his grace, you're going to find out that even when you didn't recognize he was being gracious and he was giving you favor, like eventually, if you don't, I don't know, backslide or anything and just get a cold heart, like you'll look back and say, wow, that was grace. That's what that was over there. So a small example for me is, at the beginning of our marriage, around 2022, married really young. That's why we look like 20 and 22. I don't know, it's just got good genes. But we were back when we were first married. I was so ambitious for God. I just want to do something for God, and I just didn't want to work any kind of job. I was like, no, I'm going to call to ministry. And I read a Dwight Moody book and about his testimony. He was a shoe salesman. I happened to be working for Olympia, a sneaker store. So I'm like, man, I relate to this dude. What did he do next? And Dwight Moody was so powerful. And it says he quit his job to go into the ministry. And so I was like, God, you're speaking to me. I could quit my job and be like Dwight Moody and step on faith and believe you for what's next. It was an excuse to be lazy. I was lazy. I just didn't like work. I was allergic to work. I don't want, anyway. So, we spiritualized some things. But listen, I did that, and it was hard for us, like for about, 6 months and what have you. It was just a tough time. I'm like, did I hear from you, God? Well, you know how people blame things on God? Like, that probably was one of those moments that I spiritualized like a little dysfunction in my life, and that I didn't like to work, and I used this as a cop-out. Anyway, I might have to explain that to some people because, those who are, it happens a lot in Christianity, by the way. It's like, yeah, God said it, you read it. Yeah, that's his story, not your story. Stop it. Anyway, so it wasn't working for a while, and trying to work that out. And then I wanted to get into ministry, and it was like a couple months later. Anyway, I end up talking to our youth pastor at that time, and he tells of this opportunity and for ministry. And so I look into this, and it was one of those things that you had to be experienced for. I had no experience. I didn't go to no higher education. I just barely passed high school. I barely graduated. So got there, got to the interview, and they're looking for a youth worker to work with the youth in the neighborhood and all these different programs and teaching and stuff like that. And it was all those things, and I was just like listening, and I was like, yeah, I could do this. I came in there, and they could see through that. Like, if people who are experienced can see through, I'm winging it, and whatever. So I got in there, and I say what I say, and listen, they hired me, not because I tricked them. I believe it was because of God's grace. And not only that, so from that point on, I just really wanted to excel and do well at what I was doing. Ever since that moment, I have been getting into, there was another position after that this time I did really good in transitioning, and there was an opportunity to go to Lancaster, and that's where you hear the story of Lancaster a lot. We were up there for 8 years. This job for Lancaster, I went out there, and this is not let me say this. I'm gonna say this right. So this is not just mom and pop ministry, if you will. This is They're bringing in millions of dollars, a big organization. It's a serious deal. And they are asking for qualification. They're asking for what school did you go to and all that different stuff. And I didn't have anything merited that I can present to them besides I just want to serve God. And I like kids, and I like to serve kids, and I was a kid at one time. I know what I like, and I think other kids will like what I like. And I know how to help them. And anyway, so I went through that whole ordeal, and after a couple of interviews, they hired me. But listen, I look back at that opportunity. I look back at working for the church that I work for. I look back at those things, and I'm like, that's exactly what grace is. That was grace. I didn't know I was living in it when it was happening. I didn't know it was happening to me when I was in that moment, but looking back is like, there's nothing merited to me. There was no experience that I had. There's nothing I worked for that qualified me to receive that position, to receive that kind of notoriety. I mean, I've been living grace. Even the promotion, it's grace. It's the things that God has, favor in our fellowship. That's grace. The places where I've been able to speak and communicate throughout the world, and pulpits that pastors have allowed me to preach from. I'm like, that's grace. I've been able to go to schools. Remember, I didn't get a higher education, and then now they're inviting me into higher education schools to speak and preach. I'm like, that's grace. You guys are getting a degree. I avoided this whole thing. That's grace. There's nothing merited unto me that I can be before you. There's nothing I worked for that qualifies me for this. That's grace. Inexperience. Didn't know it, but got an opportunity to do it. That's my experience. And that's where I can be like, I can understand grace. I can understand grace because of how it was given to me. So God has given it to me and you receive it, but I also see how his representatives in the kingdom demonstrated grace to me, so it gives me a context. It gives me an understanding of how grace works. There's things that I didn't work out, but doesn't mean that grace is not something that God is trying to work out for me. In 1 Peter 4:10, it says this, it says, as each one has received a special gift, employ it in serving one another as good stewards of the multifaceted grace of God. See, when we hear about grace, a lot of us know unmerited favor. If you've been around the church for a bit, you hear that term, and it's like, it sounds real technical. I don't know if I could grasp that. But he goes and he says, listen, grace is more than just like what you're getting. Like you're getting it freely. You're being blessed. God is putting favor on you. He wants to hook you up with his hookups. He's thinking about you when it's like you're in a tough situation. It's like, I'm gonna help them. I'm gonna send something and all those things. Even sometimes I don't know if, maybe I'll be careful saying that. I was like even thinking like the fact that we should pray, but sometimes he sees us and he sees a need and he'll do something even if we don't pray, because of the fact. Now that's not an excuse not to pray, y'all. Like, I don't need to pray. That's what I learned in church today. Gosh, help me. So is gracious in that he still gives. Haven't you just received something like that? I didn't know I needed that. I didn't even pray for that. And his favor is just there. His grace is just there for that. But he talks about here in 1 Peter, it's a multifaceted grace. It's like it's got more than just one face. Another side to it, besides just this one-sided, you're receiving from God. God is blessing you. God is giving you things that you don't deserve. All that stuff. It's like it's a little bit more multifaceted. And Peter's saying, I hope you receive this special gift, but you also employ it. Woo! I didn't see that until I saw that just now. He's like, we can receive the favor, but do you know how to employ favor? Because grace is multifaceted. It's just not something like, I'm just going to bask in the goodness of, I'm his favorite. All drinks are on him. Keep it coming. And we're going to just keep ordering. We're just going to keep being blessed by his blessing. It's like, that's not all of it. It's not just about you being in the bless me club. It is you knowing how to be a blessing. It's you knowing how to give it and employ it in that same way. And so it's multifaceted. There's two sides of grace. It's receiving what you didn't earn, but it's also doing what you couldn't do. See, that's the empowerment part. So I just received something. I didn't even earn that. Well, let's keep going. Let's keep going, because I'm receiving it. Thank God for his grace to do that. But God also gives you the grace to do something that you couldn't do up to the moment you received his grace. You sit back and bask in the blessing, but there's a blessing that you are, a gift that he's given you that wasn't just meant for you to just enjoy it, but also employ it. You know it's good when I rhyme some stuff once in a while, right? All right. So it's about enjoying it and receiving it, but it's also about distributing and giving it. And this is where it's hurting a lot of people, because they're taking the grace of God for granted. And they're taking the grace of God, and this is how you abuse the grace. You abuse the grace by only being the recipient of it. You're his favorite. He loves you, right? But it's like a spoiled brat. That's like, man, I'm not trying to raise spoiled brats. Like, I want to bless you. I love you. And guess what? You're going to feel spoiled. You're going to feel like I'm his favorite. Like, he just put everybody else's magnet on his refrigerator in the closet, and mine's is there. Like, that's how you should, like, we should just feel that about God in terms of how he sees us, how he's thinking about us. Like, when he opens up his phone, like, he has a phone, right? But when he opens it up, it's like the first picture that pops up before you open the unlock screen. Like that's how he is towards you. That's the revelation you got to get. That's grace. That's grace. It's like, man, I just love this one. That's my favorite. And it's almost like a different one pops up every time. Like, yep, that's my favorite too. And it might be your face. And another one, oh, that's my favorite too. And it's like, it's all of us at the same time. We're just his favorite. But just to be a recipient of that and just to bask in that without being a blessing to others, we're missing out on the fullness of grace, because it's multifaceted. Like, are you gifted but haven't done nothing with your gift in a while? Like, has God helped you with a job, but you're like, you block everybody else from having it and like getting in the door? Are you like God has blessed you with finances, he's blessed you with an intellect, he's giving you an understanding about that? The idea is that, like, you got that is grace. Because I worked hard. Well, then if you worked at it to get it, it probably isn't God's grace. But what God gives you, he gives you without sorrow. What he gives you is whole and complete. And it's like, you're so blessed by it that you can't help but like, man, I need this grace. I need to give this grace out. I need to be a dispenser and not just a receiver of it. Because favor does give you stuff. But that stuff should allow you to give to others. Like, now I'm giving to others because I've been given stuff. And like this is awesome. You don't have to hoard it. If you hoard it, like, that's where like you can be a Christian but still have an orphan heart. We talk about that in here. An orphan heart is like, man, God is giving you, he sees you as his child. He loves you. He's going to give grace to you. And you need to renew your mind. Hopefully the grace impacts you and changes you so that you see yourself and see others different. But a lot of people, it's just the one aspect of grace. It's not multifaceted. It's just like, I'm receiving the blessing. I'm receiving the opportunity. I'm going up the ladder, whatever that God is like giving me and putting me on. However, nobody else can get up here. And it's the orphan heart that causes you to hoard and withhold. Because you're in survivor mode. You don't know when the next blessing will come, right? God's like, no, you're my favorite. You don't got to worry about that. I have favor on you. I'm giving you this freely. You don't have to work at it. So don't work and work on withholding it. If anything, release and be a blessing, because that's grace as well. Grace is empowering you to do what you couldn't do before, because all of us before were stingy or selfish or whatever in some way. Grace is a picture of kindness and compassion on people. So it's not like they earned it, just like you didn't earn it. And it's like, let me see what they do with something, and then I'll see if I'm gracious towards them. No, that's not. If you receive grace, you can give grace. Like, I'm going to give my gift. I'm going to give this gift of encouragement. I'm going to give this gift of helps. I'm going to give this gift of servanthood. I'm going to give this gift of prophecy. I'm going to give this gift of healing. Because I received that grace from him, and that gift is a blessing to my life. I want to give that to others. He's empowered me to give that to others. And that shows that you're not just worshiping the gift, but you also have, like, you appreciate the giver. And then it's God saying, grace is, I want to share this with you so that you are able to share with others. And God's grace is I am with you and I am for you. Now be with others how I am with you. Wow. Who are you for? Who are you with? Who are you being gracious towards? That's why, this is interesting. This is an example. Remember how I didn't have no experience in getting the jobs I got and doing the things that I've done? That's why it's really easy for me to give many people opportunities that they don't deserve. And they're not experienced in. Ask my wife. Ask different people in the church. They're like, what are you doing? with that, like, we gotta think differently about this. And it's like, yeah, I get it. And yeah, not that people, anyway. But I'm just like, I'm really gracious with that. Like, people don't realize it. Like, a lot of people are like, no, I was qualified for being the head, whatever. You hardly showed up to church before we gave you that opportunity. Like, right? Anyway, it got quiet in here. Like, the head usher's thinking about it. Like, no, I'm not. I'm just throwing out examples. I'm just, like, picking random things out of a hat. Like, there's a lot of things that people were not qualified for. I wasn't qualified, It's just God has given a grace to do it. This grace to pastor, this grace to lead a minute is a grace. I've got to acknowledge that every day. It's a grace. It's a grace not to lose your mind. It's a grace to keep being kind. It's a grace to be compassionate. It's a great, like, you guys see some of my times my humanity comes out. You're like, oh my God. Like, but yeah. It's like, now I ask you to throw some grace back. The same grace that's been given to you to put you where you are is the grace that we need for one another. It's grace. You just give it, and those are things that I'm more prone to do. I'm more prone just to give people opportunities that are inexperienced, that that shows some faithfulness, definitely, and there's some qualities there that we don't definitely overlook. But in the beginning of our ministry, it was all grace. It's all grace. It's like, we just got to use what we got to use. I mean, we're super gracious. They be like, all right, what can I do? Yeah, we can use you. Come on in. There's a plan for your life. Just spray some Febreze on you and let's get going. We're good. That was grace. Hey, it's only crazy if it didn't work. But I kid somewhat. So, but it was seriously, it was like we were just giving grace. We're giving grace. Grace changed people. And those people we gave grace to, as much as we kind of make fun of that moment, those people were delivered from those things that they came in with. There was a lot of people that were struggling. They were delivered. We just walked with them on their journey. We just said, hey, like, we weren't even perfect, with this, but God has given us grace, and that grace has perfected us and allowed us to be generous to other people. And then we just demonstrated that, and that grace changed people. That grace caused them to like something to come alive in them, for them to realize, man, I'm someone's favorite. Man, I'm somebody is kind and compassionate and overlooking maybe some things that, like, I don't have the merit to do these things. I don't have any merits. I haven't done this before. I haven't led this ministry. I haven't led in a church. I haven't done these things before. And you give them opportunity. That's what was done for me, y'all. It was grace. Leaders had grace on me. And that's why I'm like feel empowered to do that for others. How dare I not help other people discover their gift as God has helped me through others to discover mine. I thought about something here, and this was before I came out here. And I hope I can share it so that it makes sense. So I was thinking about how, like, for people that would hear this message and hear about the grace of God and how he would just give favor and blessing and be compassionate on us and like set us up like, hey, like, I'm gonna help you get that job. I'm gonna help you with that connection. I'm gonna help you get that house. I'm gonna help you with these relationships. All those different things that he does. He just gives favor and blessing. I was thinking about how there might be some people here that are listening and like, man, but my circumstances are so unfavorable. So how are you talking to me about a God of favor and I've been serving him? But what happens like when there's things, I'm just surrounded by unfavorable things. So even though you might be hearing me like, yeah, I know God is that, but that's not reality for me. And I just got thinking about that. And I was like, God, what does that look like? Because I feel like I'm surrounded by unfavorable circumstances, but yet I'm talking about your grace. It's like, how and what do I explain? How do I help people with that? Because they probably have a hard time. Not only were they not somebody's favorite, and they're saying God says you're his favorite, but it's unfavorable around you. And then he takes me and he shows me, yeah, that happens, doesn't it? Jesus was my favorite. Moses, my favorite. And Job, I told Satan, he's my favorite. Paul, favorite. And he's showed me how he gives favor. He does all that grace is true in what he gave each of these guys. But oftentimes they were surrounded, like at some point, they were met with unfavorable circumstances. Hello, Joseph. Joseph was the favorite of the family. And God, all of a sudden, he gets plunged into unfavorable circumstances where brothers betray him and all that stuff would conclude. So for somebody to look at Joseph's life while he's in the pit, somebody to look at Job, even his friends said, God, you ain't his favorite. You're rejected. There's something off with you if this is happening to you. And that is the human way, isn't it? In our humanity, we will interpret that to be the case. It's like if it's unfavorable, you're no one's favorite. You're cursed of God. God must really hate you if this is happening to you. Well, like, why would people betray you if God gives grace to you? Why would people walk out on you? Why would people die around you if you're God's? See, when we're sitting in our circumstance and we're in that unfavorable situation, that's not only the conclusion that others make about you, but that's also the conclusion you make about yourself. It's like, I'm not his favorite. And that hit real close to home, especially when it comes to what's happening now. Yeah, some of you know, like, there's some great new faces that God is bringing here, but there's a lot of faces that are not here. And in that, people can conclude and look around as like, there's no more favor in the light anymore. I think the favor and the grace that was on Pastor Jay and all of them, I think the favor is gone. The grace is up. So this is me. This is me in my office, and then I'm sitting there, and I'm like, God, help me communicate this. And like, this is real. Like, this is unfavorable stuff. How am I about to talk about grace when maybe people's conclusion of it, and not only this is our situation, but it might be your situation where you're just unfavorable. So how can I convince them of grace? That they're God's favorite. That God is still like, man, he's with them. And man, those stories, those true stories, those true accounts just spoke to me. It's like, that's it, God. You give all this grace to Job. You gave all this grace and blessing onto Jesus. You gave all this grace to Paul. You gave all this grace. You've given grace. You just bless them. You put coats on them. You put them in front of things. All these things they didn't earn. However, there is some point in which that grace has to experience unfavorable circumstances. Circumstances where you don't even deserve it. When did Jesus deserve it? Did Job deserve it? Did any of these guys deserve what happened to us? See, that's our conclusion. If it happened to somebody, you deserve that. You deserve that unfavorable thing. You did something. I might not know what it is, but you did something, and somebody knows something that you did. But what happens where that is not the case, and that is not God's heart, but God does in those presenting you and maybe plunging you into unfavorable circumstances. He's like, now how are you going to treat this situation? Now how are you going to treat these people? Now how are you going to treat this situation because of how they're treating you and you don't deserve it? Do you have a grace that has so impacted you that you can give it to this undeserving situation, that you can give it? Now the world is watching, because what was happening before and me giving it to you was happening in your inner world. But now I'm putting you in a place where everybody can see it, Joseph. Everybody can see it, Esther. Everybody can see it, Elijah. Everybody can see it, Jesus. Everybody sees it. It's unfavorable. And Peter doesn't deserve a kind reply. Nobody deserves anything. If anything, they deserve the wrath. But what does Jesus do? What does Job do? They get through these circumstances, and like Job said, though you slay me, I will still trust in you. It might be unfavorable to me, but I know you're gracious. I know I'm your favorite. I know it looks how it looks, but I know, and I am prompted by what I know of you and what you've done for me when I didn't deserve it, that I'm going to give it to this situation. I'm going to give it to these people. I'm going to give them the same grace you gave to me is coming straight for them. And that's what Joseph did when he served his gift. That's what Jesus did when he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What was he doing? He was giving them things that they didn't deserve. And it was a picture for the world. Not just an inner picture for us, how God treats us, but it was a picture for the world of what grace looks like. The multifaceted that gives us the power, not just to receive, but gives us the power to give, to distribute to an undeserving situation. So why are we in this hellish situation? It's because we're called to be distributors of grace. Can you still be kind when they don't deserve it? Can you still be compassionate when they don't deserve it? Can you still serve your gift? Can you still prophesy when that prophecy hasn't manifested for you? Can you still lay hands on people while you have a dagger in your back? Can you still do that? Can you still stand? Can you stay silent when you know you can blast them on social media? You know you can go back and say, oh, I got some stuff on them though. Grace is like, I'm going to do something else. That's grace. That's grace. Grace is like, we didn't deserve it. They don't deserve it. But I'm still going to receive it. And I'm still going to give it. And it might seem unfair. They're like, man, but if I give grace, what if it doesn't do nothing for them? What if I give grace? What if they take it for granted? What if I give grace, what if they abuse me with the grace that I've given them? That's why grace is so scandalous. It is a scandal. This grace is a scandal for us. It's a scandal for what we do for other people. It's a scandalous affair. It's hard to determine sometimes if it's worth giving it because of our fear of what the majority of people will do with it. They might take your grace and like you give them that opportunity, you give them that shot, you give them. Guess what? We've done that with God. You act like every opportunity, everything that God has given you, you're clutch. Like, oh, I got this. This is in the pocket. Y'all receive it. I'm giving it out. So you've taken a job, and you no longer come back into his house. You got your wifey, now you out. I knew I couldn't meet her in the club. Maybe she's in the church, and then I got her in the church, and then it's like, now you and her are not in the church, back in the club. But guess what? He still doesn't withhold from you. He still knows. He saw you would do that, but he still said, I just my favorite because of my son. He's just hoping that the grace will transform you from the inside out. So it's grace. It's like you don't deserve it. And in fact, he's going to see what you're going to do with it. And guess what? He still gives it to you. Woo! Scandalous. Because you wouldn't have done it. Like, no, you can't have my kid. You can't have this person. Forget you. Because Yeah. Grace is a hard concept. If you halt the expression of grace in your life, the way you halt the expression of grace in your life is when you fail to express it. So even as you get it, there's a sense where it can have an expiration date because you don't express it. It's like it's been given to you, it's been expressed to you, but you're not going to express it back anywhere else. You're not going to give it anywhere else. It actually puts a halt on it. And it's fine because for a while, it's not fine, but you think you still have it because you're still, it's still in your life, right? There's still things that are happening. What happens is in that exhaustion of grace, now you probably got to work twice as hard. You've got to work to keep it, where before it was just freely given. Now it's a bunch of work. But that's what happens when you receive something you didn't have to work for, and you stop working at what you shouldn't have received. And then you don't work at it, and then stuff starts to happen in your life, and then you try to have to work at stuff and work to do things and work to get in God's good graces again, and it's like, that's not how grace works. It works, it's just kindness and compassion, and it's kind of a pay it forward model. We need to get to a place where people are more confident in what grace can do for people than what people do with grace. You got to be so confident. Like, you know what? I know grace is going to rock them. I don't know when and where, maybe sometime in the future, but I'm so confident because of what grace has done for me that I can give it out, regardless if they receive it or not, regardless if they abuse it or not, regardless if they don't use it in the right way or not. I've got to stay and remain confident in this grace more than I'm trying to get confident in how people are going to treat it. Because now, watch this, they're going to have to earn what you didn't work for. And now you're trying to make them perform things. And Jesus said, it is finished. It is finished. We've changed the chapter. There's no more law. It's not about works. It's about my grace. I worked to give you grace. Now you have it. Now you're in faith. Receive it and release it. When it's apparent how God's grace works, this is how you know it's apparent in your life. You'll have audacious faith, and you'll have a generous lifestyle. That's how we know you got grace. You're generous. You're not tight about anything. You're God's favorite. He's a blesser. I can give. God, why are you trying to take from me? Really? We're gonna go there. I only have this. Really? You're my favorite. There's nothing that you're giving that I don't have something greater in store. Like, I know that might seem like the world to you, but who am I in your world? And how can I want to change and show you something. You just become generous. Grace causes you to be generous. Like, you're just looking where to bless and where to be kind and where to be compassionate. And you're audacious. You're just crazy. You're just like, oh, let me try this, let me try that. Ask people about this, well, not many people, but like, when it comes to like just doing stuff in faith with God, like even like hunting for this building is like, let's just try it. Let's just try it. All I know is God says I'm under an open heaven. And I'm just like, I don't know, like I'm like going for properties that are like worth like $14 million. It's like crazy. Like, I don't know, maybe they'll give it to us for one. Come on, let's just go for it. Like, I'm just like, I just know I'm God's favorite. I don't know how it's going to work out. If it don't work out, guess what? Moving on. I'm his prize. You just have audacious faith, and people don't understand it. It's like, oh, it don't make no sense. The numbers don't add up. I was like, yeah, it don't add up when it comes to grace either. It doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. I owe him so much, and yet he gives me it for free. It don't add up. I didn't deserve that job. I didn't deserve that wife. I deserve that family, but I didn't deserve that. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I didn't deserve certain things. I didn't deserve those friends. I didn't deserve those kids. I didn't deserve that whatever. I didn't deserve that. It's just grace. It's just favor. It's just favor. And And because of that, I just got audacious. I'm like, what do you want to show me next? What do you want to do next? But let me not get so preoccupied on what you're going to do for me. It's like, what can I do for somebody? How can I bless somebody? That's why in the beginning of the pandemic, one of the things, thank God for Pastor Andre, said, we should give to a couple churches. Like, why didn't I think of that? Great idea. Like, yes, let's give to other churches and pastors. Let's do that because they're probably struggling. Instead of being an orphan and saying, no. Keep all our stuff together in the house. These people are giving, and it's like, we don't know if, everybody's going to be gone. It's like, no, we need to, yes, exactly what we need to do. We need to be gracious. We need to be giving. We gave so much time. We gave so much, and it was grace that even gave us the ability to do that. Half the things we said, half the things we did, that was grace. That was like, I am weak, I am poor. That was probably all of us, right? One of the poorest seasons, one of the weakest seasons. But that's where his grace steps in. For everybody else, it made sense you were like that. If it didn't make sense we were like that, it's because of his grace. Because it didn't make sense. So many responsibilities, so many different things pulling us in different directions. All of us experienced it. Did his grace get you through, or did you get you through? I'm telling you, for me and my house, it was only grace. Grace that we're standing, grace that we're lifting our hands, grace that we're still here. Grace. It's the favor of God. We need it, but we also need to give it. And so I hope you receive some of that today. You receive that you're God's favorite, but your favor is just not for you. Your favor is you be so blessed that you become a blessing. Watch when you begin to do that, how it just becomes a flywheel. I can give them more because they know exactly what to do. They're just dispensers, stewards, distributors. They're not holders, and they're not keeping it for themselves, and they're not going to worship the blessing like idols in their life and forget me when I give it to them. He's like, no, and sometimes we got to get stripped like Joseph, stripped like Jesus, stripped like Job, because after Job's story, all the things that he lost, man, what he got on the back end of all that was like, God is my favorite, and it showed up, man. His daughters that were born to him, his family that was born to him, the riches doubled. It was everything. He was like the intercessor for the town. It was like everything. He was just like that's the dude. He's my favorite. Why do I have to go through so much? Because I want that grace and favor to not just be on you. I want it to come through you into the world. Amen. Come on, let's stand to our feet. I'll keep talking about grace. Isn't that the blessing that Aaron blessing that he prays? He says, may his face shine upon you. May he be gracious towards you, give you what you don't deserve. Why don't we just close our eyes and bow our heads in this place?